Welcome, Tom. At least it's your premises. So.
Welcome.
Publicis. It's really interesting to see how you've come through your career, and very interesting degree, I thought, industrial relations with computing. How has that led you on into?
Well, actually, I think it was the computing part that led me on. So I did the industrial relations because it was a degree I was able to do based on the qualifications I had at A-level.
Mm-hmm.
It got me into university, and it was while at university that the computing side of things started to really appeal. So my first job outside of leaving university was right in at the coalface of operating VAX VMS systems.
I noticed that, yes. What was that, a digital VAX?
Yes,
VAX.
the DEC VAX,
Yep.
exactly, for a financial services organisation. So it was a 24/6 shift system.
Mm.
So you certainly learn to type commands in when you're tired, in the middle of the night, carry lots of printer paper as well. But it was a good way to break into computing and industry as well.
And the VAX was a nice machine.
It was a very nice machine, very good for number crunching. And it was, in fact, when I first started, we were still using spool-to-spool backup tapes, the big sort of 13-inch circular backup tapes, using about 12 or 14 of those per night on a backup. And
it really brought client-server in, didn't it?
It did. It did. I mean, it was obviously thin client. It was terminal-based. All that sort of stuff, but it was just on the cusp of when they were bringing out, for instance, NT 3.5 for alpha chips on the DEC platform, which didn't go anywhere.
I know, I was caught by that one.
Yes, exactly. But it helped me cut my teeth, I think, on some of those emerging technologies, such as the early Macintosh and the early PCs as well.
And then you moved to PwC, was that? Yeah.
No, I actually moved to a company called Adris, which sold computers and AutoCAD software, so Autodesk. So I was a field service engineer, and I think that was where I got my sort of diagnostic capability from, because you're 60 miles away from home on a client site who's tapping his watch and wondering when you're going to be finished with fixing his computer, and all you've got is a briefcase full of spares, and so you actually almost do chewing gum and sticky tape your way out of the situation to make it work. And I think that's what really hones my ability to, troubleshoot. Yeah, troubleshoot and adapt, improvise, and overcome.
And then PwC, was it?
Then it was a company called Kinesis, where I was the IT manager, and Kinesis was acquired by Coopers and Lybrand, and then subsequently became PwC. So I ran, it was in Swindon, I ran their operations, and then Coopers and Lybrand came in. We then built a solution centre, so it's where I cut my teeth on SAP, running data general servers.
Oh, really?
We created a fully operational warehouse and office and shop and shopping mall experience.
So retail SAP?
Yeah, retail SAP, exactly. And it was all designed for that.
That was very early on, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that would have been, let's see, 97, 98, something like that. And it was, nobody had ever seen anything like it. We created fictional companies that, because at the time, Tesco's would want to ask Sainsbury's why they were so successful, but they couldn't. So they would come and ask this fictional company that PwC created,
I see.
how would you do things?
Right.
So it worked out that way. So it was, we were even trained by actors on how to interact with our clients whilst being members of this fictional company. So it was the role play aspect, although not extensive, was actually quite important to that story.
Right. And then you moved into more general.
Yeah, so
generic stuff.
I built more another solution centre in Heathrow. I did more IT consultancy, moved into the consultancy side.
What was the Heathrow one? Was that?
It was called 27 Degrees North, and it was a customer centre. It was supposed to be it was about a 20,000 square foot area, a quarter of which was the server room. I mean, it was very, very heavily technology centric. And it was supposed to be like an incubator space for PwC to fast track certain projects or certain clients outside of the constraints of their normal enterprise environment. So we ran that environment next to, alongside the PwC environment, but separately. It was under our own remit, under our own governance.
And that was still Kinesis, was it?
No, that was PwC.
PwC
That was PwC,
yeah.
That's right.
And then you moved on to Sapient.
That's right, where I took a sort of slight right turn, where I did IT management again, but also office services or facilities. So I was looking after not just the front of house IT, but the office itself. Because we're an international business, at one point I was handling 150 corporate apartments across London for our visitors and for our staff as they moved across, around the world.
So that was a general office role as well as the computing.
That's
role.
right, and also relocation, office relocation, and fit out and all that sort of thing.
A very nice mention from Tim Smith.
Yes, yeah,
LinkedIn.
Tim Smith. He was around at the time when we moved, and it was all I can remember it being constantly dark, because I'd be in the office when it was dark and I would leave the office when it was dark, and that was in the summer.
Absolutely.
So it
not
was
in Finland.
No, not in Finland. That was in London. So there was a lot of long hours, a lot of effort. But yes, I remember Tim Smith very, very fondly. He was certainly somebody who suffered no fools and pushed you to do your very, very best work.
But the mention there was that actually you enabled the UK operation, really.
Well, we took a lot of money off the bottom line by relocating to where we did. We took a lot of money off the bottom line by, to be blunt, sticking to the budget on a relocation. And any kind of significant move like that very often goes over budget. We were able to control those costs. We expanded, our capabilities in the sort of back office with IT services. We were able to host more equipment. We were able to be more flexible. We also built up the IT and office services teams to be more responsive, etc. And it was on the back of that my London role then became a global role for Sapient.
When you moved into security at that stage, was it?
No, that was before. Between 2005 and 2008 was when I moved into, or 2004, 2008, sorry, when I moved to the global IT and office services role.
Right.
And then it was early 2008, and I spoke to our COO, and I thought there was a gap in what we were doing, mostly around business continuity and disaster recovery. And he said, yes, you're absolutely right, and there's also a gap here, 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 and here.
Do you think that was early in the game? 2008?
I don't think it was early, but I also don't think it was late. I think probably early for the type of company that we were at the time. We did do security training, but that was kind of it. It was a compliance exercise, not an education exercise. But what I was able to do was establish a formal team and a formal function. And then actually Sapient brought somebody else in to lead that up for a few years, which took it to the next level. And then when he moved on, I took it back over again.
So as the group security,
as the Sapient expanded, and then subsequently to when Sapient was acquired by Publicis Groupe.
So interesting moves.
Yes,
and quite a different culture, I should think.
It is. It's kind of like a dichotomy of cultures. You have the group culture, which is headquarters, obviously corporate focused, and then the agencies, and we have a lot of agencies. And they all have their own cultures as well. So we, in my role now, I have to try and adjust according to the cultures and the environments that we operate in, as well as meeting the upper level group requirements.
So lessons learned in that journey, what would you say?
Keep things simple. One of my early lessons in security was overcomplicating a particular solution and it going nowhere very quickly. Got a severe dressing down for that. And from that point on, it was very clear that I had to keep things as simple as possible. I think also...
Is that simple in communication or in solution?
Solution and execution. By example, I tried to roll out a 200-question questionnaire. It failed miserably. We reduced it to 12, and it was a success.
And we got the results.
And we got the results we needed.
Yeah.
Maybe not the 100% accurate results that we desired, but it was good enough. And I think, never let perfect be the enemy of, or good enough be the enemy of perfect.
But it sounds as though one of the lessons also was communication.
Communication, and in fact I was going to lead on to that, actually understanding the business, and actually understanding what it is the business needs and does. All too often we come across, or I come across situations where people are saying the business isn't listening, they're doing stupid things, they're doing risky things. Well, actually maybe that's what the business needs to do in order to survive.
Yes, I noticed in your blog that you focus very much on risk and the need to accept risk and the need to use it, in fact.
I think so. Of all the things you can do with risk, accepting risk seems to be the one that's either most underutilised or most abused. There's never a happy medium, and I think it's down to the fact that as human beings we don't understand risk very well. Professor Steve Peters, who's the British cycling psychologist, does a good job of explaining how it's our monkey brains. It's the primeval part of our brain that tells us the fight or flight instinct, and actually in today's nuanced world that's just not true at all. And in various talks I've done, I've sort of given examples on how that might, how we actually see that in our day-to-day lives, and how we address that or how we convert that to our working lives and security as well. So.
And it sounds as though you've really got buy-in from the top in the Publicis role, because you report into the chief executive of resources and then report into the chairman of the group, which is a big group. I mean,
that's right.
80,000 strong, you were saying. Yeah.
That's right. Yes, I think we do. I think there is we enjoy a good quality level of support and communication with the group. Do I want more? Of course I do, but I'm sure so does the legal team and the finance team and the all of the other teams as well. And I think that's part of that realization, is that actually we're not an island of one. We're not the be all and end all. We're part of a larger group of people who help to influence the business. And we do see our influence in the business, and we do see responses and communications and changes in sort of culture and direction as a result of the work we do. So, I do feel very fortunate that we do have that level of support. And
it's really broader than purely information security. It's a physical security role as well.
In some cases, there's still, we're a relatively new function within Publicis Group, and there's a lot of various ownership among facilities, etc. But I think, without wishing to sound like we're land grabbing, the influence is growing, and actually we're showing that it's a connected environment. And if we don't directly own something, then we certainly make ourselves open and available to assist. I don't care whether it has our name on it or somebody else's name on it, as long as the end result is still a positive one. And I think, again, back to that sort of special flower syndrome, there's too much of, very often there's this case of, well, if it's not got information security or IT security stamped on it, then it's not valid, which is not true at all. It's actually about the end result.
So do you think there's much more awareness now at the senior levels?
I think so, and I think that, not only the popular media, but also, the information security media have a lot to do with that, I think it's becoming far more prevalent, obviously. It's becoming, it's a bit like any evolving industry. It's like, the cars, when they first came out, they were a novelty, and a few people had them and knew how to operate them, and a few people really didn't. But as they become more and more prevalent, and as digital and IT and technology and Internet of Things becomes more prevalent, people are starting to understand the pit stops, and understand the pitfalls far more than they did before, and it's a gradual process.
But the threat is changing, really, isn't it? I mean, prevention, pretty difficult now.
detection.
What BCC, the British Chambers of Commerce, was saying 40% of UK big business was actually breached last year.
Yeah.
That's a big figure.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
And actually, prevention is just one part of it. It used to be the core part, but prevention, detection, and response.
So the medieval castle where you're keeping the firewall.
Yeah, it's not valid anymore. You know, it's in the old days, medieval castles, their kings didn't, or their knights didn't work from home, whereas ours do, and so they demand that perimeter is porous, and it needs to be porous in order for us to do our roles and to do business in today's world. So it's not just prevention. Prevention is a part of it. Let's not, let's still build some walls, but let's not leave, holes unguarded. But we also need to detect when something has come through. And we also need to know how to respond. Half the time, many people don't even have formal responses to how things happen. And very often, until something actually happens, you don't.
So
realize
disaster recovery or
just incident
business
response.
continuity, incident response.
I would see incident response being more important than disaster recovery and business continuity, because I think, DR and BCP, any company worth its salt will find a way to get things back up and running. The incident, however, is at the time of highest stress, highest emotion, highest level of scrutiny, certainly in the public eye, and that's where I think companies fall down.
So something like GDPR, whether you've got that 72-hour window, it's
now
going to be quite challenging.
Well, now it's becoming a regulatory requirement.
Yep,
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
compliance with that is going to be quite
But
challenging.
knowing what you're going to do, and then you can establish, some backups. The tribal knowledge will get you through initially. When it comes to incident response, I don't think the tribal knowledge does. You need some kind of formal structure. Be that even just communicating to your employees.
Good one, that one, because when you look at the threats, actually, one of the biggest ones is obviously internal plus.
Yes.
The people being the weakest link.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? You're a big organisation, it's quite loose and quite loosely.
We try and
organised.
communicate and try and keep open. In terms of incident management, just to swing it back that way, an adage I heard from a close colleague the other week was, whenever you communicate to the public, make sure you're communicating an almost identical message to your employees, and vice versa, because actually the message you give to your employees is going to find its way out to the public. And if the two don't match, you're going to be in trouble.
You've got a problem.
But when it comes to insider threat, 99% of it is non-malicious. It's just accidental.
So training is important.
Training is important. Just awareness initially. Training is all well and good, but nobody's got time to be trained half the time. Awareness is something that you can do over a long period of time. Something that you can ingrain within people. The challenge, I think, is that people confuse training and awareness. I train my people. I give them an hour a year on security. They should know what they're doing. They don't at all. They've complied to your training requirements, whereas the awareness is a far more long-term plan. It should be a multi-year program, not a multi-month program, but a multi-year program. It should just be a constant trickle. As we were talking about, before we started filming, about the drink driving campaigns and seatbelt campaigns. They've carried on. They are still going on now. Even though the net result has been dramatically positive in dropping deaths and dropping drink driving incidents, etc., it's still going on.
I know. I was in Pilkington, and all the research was on the windscreen, and at one instant with the seatbelt, all that went away.
Yes, exactly.
Triplex still built windscreens, but
Yeah.
it didn't have those horrific accidents.
That's right. Yeah, precisely. There was a compensating control put in place.
Just keeping on the theme of people, we keep being told there's a shortage of cyber and information security specialists.
I don't buy into that. I think Well, I don't buy into the larger argument. Is there a shortage of trained security specialists? Yes. So what? Let's go out and employ people who are passionate, who care about what they do, who have a culture and values that are shared with the company that we work for, and bring them in, treat them well, train them well, reward them well, and you'll keep them for years, and they will be doing exactly what you want them to do. And you're also contributing to that larger, community pool of knowledge as a result. I think that the days of being able to pull people off the shelf and pull skills off the shelf are long gone. And I think that also goes a long way to explaining why we're in many of the situations we're in today anyways. It is. We should be nurturing and growing, I don't want to say the next generation, but the next, a group of people on a regular basis, bringing them in, because I can teach skills, I can't teach values. I can't teach
Attitudes
culture.
are changing though, aren't they? I mean, if you look at the generations and the way the older generations looked at security and information security, and now the way the younger generation actually use technology, quite a different approach, and especially to privacy, isn't there?
There is, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's their privacy that they are exposing at the time. But that also doesn't mean that people can't be, taught new ways of looking at things. But when I talk about culture and values, etc., that's more fundamental than just how you might use a device. I think that's something that's an innate part of who you are and what you do. I would suggest you could take anybody of an employable age, and over time, however many years, actually grow them into the security professionals that we want and need. But people seem to be unwilling to invest.
So the movement into the new technologies, digital, and also increasing use of consumerization, broadband, cloud especially, are those bringing new challenges? Is it difficult to work with those, cloud especially?
I think any technology, absolutely. It's a bit like the big slab in 2001 with the the monkeys around it. It's a new thing comes along and nobody wants to touch it first, and nobody wants to get into it. And some of the more adventurous will get into it sooner rather than later, and some will be slightly less adventurous. And I think that's that's a perfectly normal human attitude. It depends on the industry you're in. So financial services is generally slightly more reticent to adopt something like that, partly because of regulation, and partly because of risk. But over time, cloud adoption has not gone down. In fact, it's just increasingly gone up and up and up and up.
Very much.
Combination of people understanding the risk more, and the cloud suppliers, the cloud vendors, providing a better quality product than you can provide yourself. That's not to say that everything in 100 years will all be on the cloud. There will always be in-house, I think, to one degree or another, but that balance is certainly shifting.
That's definitely the indication in the market that so many things are becoming cloud-enabled, going all the way up the stack from
Exactly.
infrastructure, platform, software, etc.
I think there will be specialised environments and specialised cases where there will not be any cloud infrastructure involved, and that's fine. Maybe specialist military or critical infrastructure
Where you
environments.
need the air gap and so
Yes,
on.
exactly. Exactly. I can't imagine having a nuclear power facility running on rack space, for instance. That's probably not the best place to put it. Not because of rack space, of course, but the inherent risk is just obviously way too high.
Right. So social media, any particular issues in use of that?
Well, I mean,
using Yammer?
Internally we use Yammer, for
Yeah,
instance,
yeah.
but as with any company, media communications,
Well, especially, I would have thought. Yeah.
we absolutely we embrace, and we actively encourage our clients to embrace. In fact, our clients come to us to help them embrace social media.
How to use it? Yeah.
Absolutely, it's all part of that whole digital marketing strategy. So, personally, I like social media. I do Twitter, which is actually my main one. I don't do Facebook. I do Twitter and LinkedIn. actually, if it's used right and if you focus on it, you get a huge amount of value on it. Twitter is also one of our threat intelligence feeds. It's also one of our crisis management feeds.
Yeah,
you know. If something happens in a city halfway around the world, look on Twitter. You'll soon find out if something's actually happening. You'll find out quicker than you will off the BBC. You know, and various other social medias. But personally, I think it's a great thing. You have to manage it and control it.
Yeah.
Like all these things. I think it's absolutely the way to go.
And the big new one, IoT, Internet of Things.
Yeah. Well, I can't. Again, it's like the big monolith slab. I think, it's still early days. A lot of it has been commoditized. I mean, I'm just having my kitchen remodeled this August, and I'm already looking at putting up some lovely IoT lights with lots of different colours because it's going to look really cool, and I can, control it from my phone and
have a disco.
And shut off. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's brilliant. Am I worried about my lights being hacked? Well, maybe I should be after this interview, but not on the whole. But I absolutely see that there's so many manufacturers out there are not adhering to even fundamental standards. But we even saw this, 5-10 years ago with Bluetooth insulin pumps, that could be hacked from 20 meters away to deliver lethal levels of insulin. This is not a new problem. It's just that it's far more.
It's expanded.
It's expanded, and it's everywhere.
I think the worry
is the same thing.
I think the worry is in the supply chain, actually.
Yes, and where the components are actually sourced from. But again, if the product is put together properly and tested properly and architected properly, even that shouldn't really be a problem. So it's I don't know. I think yes, it's always been a problem. It's been a niche problem. It's now becoming a mainstream problem. Which I also think, as a result, it will then be addressed. IKEA just released new smart lights, and apparently the initial verdict is these are the most secure lights you can get because they've kept it simple, they've used the right protocols, they've shut everything down. I mean, IKEA, right? They're doing better than all of the other, the specialist, light and bulb makers.
So taking over the Uber cars is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, precisely. That's only good if he takes a wrong turn, though.
So the threat, is it really changing? I mean, internal versus external and professional versus amateur. We're talking about Cold War and corporate attacks and national attacks.
I think at a basic level, the threats are the same. The threats are, internal non-malicious is probably one of the biggest because due to ignorance and lack of awareness, etc. Yes, there
more cock-up than conspiracy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think I wouldn't like to put a percentage on it, but I think that's a significant chunk of what we need to look at, and that's why we run training and awareness campaigns. I think the cost of entry into becoming a disruptor and a legal disruptor in this industry is so much lower. There's a ransomware kit that's available now for $175 on the dark web, which allows you to, once you've got your infrastructure, which you can build or hire fairly cheaply, you're off. You can start making money. So the cost of entry is a lot lower. The awareness amongst the industry is a lot higher. Therefore, we're protecting against it a little bit better. Government and let's start with professionals. Yes, of course. They've got themselves far more organised than we have. But again, we're. I guess we're in that situation. They only have to get through once, and they've won, and we have to win we have to stop them every single time, etc. But that's not really changed, is it? It's the same.
Do you think there's undue complacency though in organisations? Not obviously talking about your own, but
I think there might be undue complacency because they've not experienced it first or second hand. I mean, many companies, there's that old adage of it's 211 days or something like that before you after you've been attacked, that you've been attacked, that you've been breached. That probably doesn't help.
So the AI tools do help there, things like dark trace, etc.
Possibly. We go back to that whole detection thing rather than prevention. I think to be blunt, just some basic good housekeeping and monitoring would do 90+% of that job. Yes, as time evolves and as the threats evolve, etc., and as the AI technology improves and becomes more affordable, yes, of course we're going to go that way.
Then the other side of developing the AI as well.
Well, precisely. It is an arms race at the end of the day. You're just trying to make your particular environment just that little bit too much expensive than the opponent can afford. I
rather liked your wife's comment about convenience eats security for breakfast.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, of course it does. It's. I do it all the time. When I'm setting up an account on a website I'm not going to use very often, I'll bang out a generic password, and if I'm lucky, I'll remember to change it. A week later. But of course, because I need something done now. And if I as a professional behave like that, I think and thankfully I have tools that go through and check my passwords and tell me which ones I should change, all that sort of thing. But I'm the outlier in the world.
Sure.
Not everybody does that. So of course we just do what we need to do. We need to, as an industry, we need to be far more transparent. And it's getting there, but it's people are expecting results tomorrow, and they're going to come next year and the year after.
Interesting development you had with Host Unknown.
Yes.
Is it on the back burner at the moment? Or?
No. We're still we're working on the next film. It was all a good crack, to be honest with you. The idea was that we were going to become internet famous and be invited around the world to host conferences for free and be paid to do talks and things like that. And it's not really come true, but it's. I think what we really wanted to do was, InfoSec, information security, is potentially one of the dullest subjects you can talk to somebody about. Apart from maybe dentistry. But I think the concept is that InfoSec is not necessarily funny, but it can be fun. You can enjoy yourself while you're doing it, and that's what this is about. So our first music video, the CISSP one, at the time that qualification was being put through the ringer by social media, etc. This is a waste of time, it's too heavy, it's out of date, etc. We thought, hang on, let's make it cool again. So hence we did that film. And we've done other things around Christmas, and what can I say? We're all frustrated actors, or we'll just like to hear the sound of our own voices or something like that. But we get together and we try and cut away all of the rubbish and all of the flannel that comes with InfoSec, and actually cut down to the nub of it and make it enjoyable. And there's plenty of evidence, not necessarily from us, but plenty of evidence elsewhere that actually creating that fun, visceral response in somebody actually creates a far more lasting behavioural change than scaring somebody or telling somebody.
Humour beats fear, uncertainty and doubt.
Absolutely, every time.
Mind you, to get the board's attention, sometimes you need to use that fear.
Yeah, but you can only use it once, or once or twice, because you can't escalate fear, uncertainty and doubt. Or you can only escalate it so many times. With humour, you can continue to tell jokes and people still laugh. But if you continue to scare people, they get bored of being scared, if you see what I mean.
I think the GDPR one with that 4% of revenue, though, is...
yeah, that's scary.
It's got some mileage.
It has got some mileage, absolutely. What was it? It was explained to me as it was explaining to the board in terms of ROI, which is risk of incarceration. So, to what extent a board member might, be banged up as a result of not doing something. But again, that only goes so far, you know. And I think, you know, yeah, the 4%, it's a big number.
But it sounds as though within the organisation anyway, you've got that exposure with the chairman, etc.
We do.
Yeah.
But you know, but to go back to that 4% point, I think, you know, one of the things is, you know, whoever the exec will just look at the lawyers and say, well, it's your job to make sure it's, you know, it's negotiated down. You know, it's your job to argue that it's restricted, etc. So, in many cases, there's compensating controls, or at least there are believed to be compensating controls in place. So difficult, you know.
So digital.
Yes.
Everybody's going mad about digital. What does it mean?
It means that your data is on a computer somewhere, to be honest with you, you know, or
what we used to call, yes.
Yeah, your browsing habits and your, you know, your purchasing habits and all that sort of thing. But it is a way, you know, and I'm no marketing specialist by any stretch, but it's a way of reaching new consumers in more dynamic and personal ways. You know, to engage them, to use your product more, and to spread your reputation and what it is you do as far and wide as possible. So it's a natural evolution. You know, we've moved beyond. Well, we haven't moved beyond. It's not just pictures and words anymore. It's far more engaging than that.
So anything special in terms of digital and security?
Well, anything digital, I think. You know, we often find ourselves, you know, anybody who handles any kind of digital content at one point or other, and whatever industry you're in, is going to be handling some kind of personal information or some kind of sensitive or confidential information. And so, yes, it absolutely does, and it does affect security, and security
so
will
identity information, personal information.
Potentially identity. It could be confidential. It could be intellectual property. It could be whatever. But you know, as soon as you start working with companies that are, you know, letting you access their data, it changes the game entirely. It changes the terms of the contract. It changes the terms of the security schedule. The master services agreement. The whole thing changes. And so I think we're seeing far more interaction with agencies that are working in that digital environment.
And obviously the need to keep that data current and to have the necessary authorization, etc., to use that data. I mean, some of the digital marketing companies, I think, are going to have to change the way they actually use the data, or how long they keep it, etc.
Absolutely. I mean that, you know, large companies, you know, like us, I think are addressing that. I can't speak for any of the smaller companies, but I also know how difficult it is for us to be successful at that. So therefore, how much more difficult it is for a smaller company who hasn't got dedicated resources on this. You know, so it's going to, you know, it's a potential issue for many, you know, smaller digital agencies.
You can't just keep that personal data for a rainy day or for another marketing campaign.
Right.
Or
no, you have to. Absolutely. And in fact, you know, our stance, and I believe the stance of everybody, should always be, when asked, you know, or when told, you know, you need to have access to the data, is to refuse access to the data. And the second response should be to refuse access to the data again. You know, you really have to be sure if you need it. It's all too often it's just handed out a little bit too easily, you know, without any real understanding. If you're not careful, just refuse it, work around it. Do, you know.
I gather the younger generation are actually finding that out now.
Yes, yeah, I think so. I think so. But you know, but again, coming back to that privacy thing, you know, it's in many cases they don't care, you know, which I think it will change. I think it will change. Certainly with some of the, you know, the legal changes we've seen in, for instance, the US with the ISP laws changing so they can market the data that they gather, for instance, you know, and certainly in the UK as well. I think we'll see a pushback against that.
Well, I think we've come pretty well to the end, unless there was anything else you felt like we hadn't covered. We've covered the waterfront, really.
I think so. I hope so. I hope so.
So, thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.